It's time to do the front brakes on my 2017 Sportwagen. There's actually quite a bit of meat left on the pads, but these rotors have become scored over time, and so I'm gonna do them. This car has 86,000 miles on it, so I got a lot of life out of these pads and rotors, but I don't like this scoring that's happening here. I don't know if that'll come out in the picture, but okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop off this clip here that holds the brake line to the hub, and then I'm going to use a 13 millimeter on the back bolt, and then a 17 millimeter to hold this nut here, or this guide pin, in place as I do that. So a 13 back here, 17 here, and I'm going to take this top one off, and then the bottom one I'm going to just loosen so I can swing out the caliper. And this, you just have to get a flathead screwdriver in here and pop this piece up. And like I said, you take a 17 millimeter and hold the nut, and then a 13 millimeter on the back, and you can take off this bolt for the guide pin. Once the bolt's out for the top guide pin and the bottom one's loosened, you can just take the caliper. Make sure you take this piece out, and then you can rotate the caliper down. Might need something to wedge in there. There you go. And this isn't that heavy, so you can kind of let it rest on the line here. And now it's easy to take out the pads. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking a C-clamp and I'm basically forcing the piston back in. And before I did that, I just put some of this rubber conditioner around the piston seal, just so that when I push it back in, that rubber is conditioned while it's back inside of the casing. While you're compressing the piston, make sure you check the reservoir and that it's not going to overflow. If it is, you'll have to use a turkey baster or something to take a little bit out. With the pads up, just rotate the caliper back up into place and then secure it with the nut. And then use a 21 millimeter to take off the main bolts for the caliper carrier. So there's one on the top here, and then there's one on the bottom, so that's 21 millimeter. And so you have to take off the carrier in order to get the rotor off. Okay, then you can just set the caliper up on the top here, and then use a T30 to take off this set screw inside the rotor. Okay, then you might have to use a rubber mallet or something to bang on the rotor on the sides to get it to release for the rust, but it will eventually release. Okay, now that the rotor's off, I'll use a scouring pad or some type of sandpaper or something to clean up the rust that's left on the hub here. So now what I did is I used a very thin layer of anti-seize compound or some type of aluminum paste or something to just coat this so that it doesn't stick, or prevent it from trying to stick. And then I'm going to use some degreaser here on the new rotor, because it usually ships with some type of oil that is anti-rusting oil, and so I'll clean that off before I go ahead and mount this. Okay, then use that T30 set screw to remount the rotor onto the hub, and then we'll take our caliper and put that back in place with those 21 millimeter bolts. Okay, now that you got the caliper carrier back in place, swing out that top again, and you can pull out these pins. I'll do one at a time, and basically I just clean off the old grease and put on some new grease onto these pins, and then put them back into place. You can replace these rubber boots here, but mine are in good shape, so I'm going to leave these alone. So now what I've done is I put a small amount of grease on these steel guides for the pads, the top and the bottom and the sides, just a little bit of grease, so that they'll slide on this carrier a little bit easier. And now you just got to press them into place, so this spring will kind of compress and you can fit it into this groove of the carrier top and bottom. I find it's easiest to just push the top or the bottom into place, and then you can wedge the top. So basically you're going to push from this side, which is going to compress this spring here, and then you can push it down into that groove. And here's what it looks like when it's seated in place properly. Okay, the rear pad is kind of a tricky one to get in, but you just have to get your head back there and wedge it into place, and then you can slide or move the caliper back up into position, line up that top bolt hole, and then put that 13mm bolt back in. Once I get this 13mm bolt loosely in there, now I'll take the bottom one, 13mm off all the way, and pull that guide pin out, and so I can grease that guide pin. Okay, tighten down those two 13mm bolts. Remember, this is a 17mm on the inside if you want to hold it in place while you're tightening down the outside. I'll put all the torque specs in the description on the bottom section there. Then you just put this spring clip back into place by getting the proper tool and hammer that into place, and then you're done. You put the wheel back on, torque down the lug nuts, and take it for a test drive. Make sure you bed in the brakes, in which case you're just going to take it up to about 30 miles an hour and then brake firmly, and do that maybe 5 to 10 times. Also check your reservoir up top and make sure it's at the max, no more than the max level. If not, if it's above the max, you just take a little bit of brake fluid out. That's it. That's how to change the front brakes on a 2017 Sportwagon. See you in the next video. If you're curious, here's the parts I'm using, the Raybestos Element 3. There's the part number. I'll put a link to it down in the description. And here's the pads. And there's the focus part number.